Welcome to the first episode of the Cisco iPrize Webcast series. I'm Parisa Bastani with Cisco. In this webcast series, we'll be interviewing innovation leaders to get their perspective on entrepreneurship and big ideas. Speaking of big ideas and innovation, I'm here with Guido Jouret, CTO of Cisco's Emerging Technologies Group. Thanks for joining us today, Guido.
You're welcome, Parisa.
How do you define a big idea?
So when we think of big ideas, we tend to look for ideas that are billion-dollar markets. And that's mainly because when we get ideas from people, a lot of the ideas tend to be feature enhancements. So you take something you already know, and people think, how do I make it better? And what we're actually interested in is not so much features to make existing things better, but we're looking for entirely new markets, new product families, things that we could grow and make into billion-dollar markets.
Great. What are the elements of a big idea?
So when we think of a big idea, we look for a couple of key attributes. So first of all, is the idea worthwhile? Will people pay money for it? Does it address a real pain point? Because one of the things we have to, of course, understand is if it takes too long to explain why you might be interested in this thing, it's probably not a big idea. I like to think that big ideas come in small packages, meaning it should be easy in about 10 words or less to describe what a new idea is about. And if you can't make it fit in 10 words or less, then you don't have a big idea. You have what I call a Christmas tree, which is you're adding a lot of bright lights and tassels and everything else to make it seem bigger. But big ideas are actually simple ideas. And therefore, you should be able to get it across simply. And it should be something that's compelling. When people hear it, they say, oh, of course, I'd want one of those. And then they should say, I'd be willing to pay for that, because that's another key question, of course, right? You might have a great idea, but if nobody will pay for it, then it's not much of a business. And then it's also, how do I make it? How do I sell it? Who's my customer? So you have to think through those attributes as you're thinking about your big idea.
So let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I think I have a big idea. How do I know if that idea is viable?
So one of the good ways is to tell it to friends and family and people that might resemble your future customer. You'd say, what if I had the following? Would you be willing to pay this much for this product or this idea? And I think it's a great way to get feedback. Sometimes people feel a bit reluctant because they say, if I tell you about it, then you might run away with the idea. And that is a risk. But the reality is that by getting more feedback on your idea, you typically make it better. And people will typically help you out by pointing out things you didn't think about. And we find when we're developing our own startups inside Cisco, that we force them to go out and meet with lots and lots of customers, because in so doing, we improve the idea. We go out with one set of assumptions, and we come back with a whole list of improvements on how this idea could actually be better.
Let's say I think I've spotted a market transition. How can you be sure? How do you spot a market transition?
That's a great question. So I think market transitions occur because either changes in business models, which could come about because there's a change in the landscape of suppliers. Maybe there's a new company that comes into the space that's trying to do something better. For example, in the airlines, you might say Southwest Airlines here in the United States, offering a new model of cheap and cheerful travel, as an example. Sometimes it comes about because of changes in the laws. So maybe the regulations change and all of a sudden competition can arise. This happened, for example, recently in India a couple of years ago when they deregulated the telecom industry, which unleashed a boom in telecom services. Sometimes it's technology. So you end up with a substantial improvement in the technology. That means what used to cost a lot of money is now a whole lot more affordable, which means you can now address applications or uses of that technology that you couldn't before. So it's important to look for things that have changed, and the things that have changed could be government, society, technology, economics, politics, and those potentially then upset the value chain. And that's what we talk about when we talk about disruptions, is really their changes in how people make money.
How would you define innovation?
So I think innovation is part invention and part perspiration, and that's why when you put them together you get innovation. But it's an applied idea, right? I mean, a lot of people have great ideas, but I think the difference between a great idea and an innovation comes from the application. So an innovation is an applied idea. It's when an idea gets turned into a product or service that you then sell. And we've come to realize that having ideas is relatively easy. Innovation is hard because innovation is down to execution as well. You have to sell. You have to make this thing real. And therefore, there are many different types of innovations, but it's mostly by applying an idea that you get innovation.
What are the different types of innovation, in your opinion?
So there are many, many different types, but sometimes people talk about sustaining innovation versus disruptive innovation. And sustaining innovation is what I typically call faster, cheaper, better. How do you take something that exists and just improve on it? Mm-hmm. And that's typically the case in a lot of mature businesses because people continuously enhance what they know. And then occasionally, of course, you get a complete transformation. You get a disruption, going from the horse and buggy to the automobile, the invention of the airplane. So you get these breaks. This is no longer an improvement on the idea. This is a very different thing. And that's what we call a disruptive innovation. But in general, there aren't just these two types. I think there's innovation in marketing, there's innovation in manufacturing, there's innovation in supply chain. And in Jeffrey Moore's book, Dealing with Darwin, he defines 14 different types of innovation. There's as many as you care to define, but there are many, many different types.
How can innovation be disruptive?
I think innovations can be disruptive when they fundamentally alter the economics. So when you make something faster, cheaper, better, you save a little bit of money here or you make a little bit more money there, but we're talking about small increments. When we talk about disruptive innovation, what typically happens is existing leaders fall, new companies emerge, the value gets redistributed. The people that used to make money don't. New entrants start making more money. And that is the nature of a disruptive innovation. And Clayton Christensen, in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, talks a lot about the nature of disruptions. But they essentially involve fundamental changes in economic value creation and capture.
Obviously, capturing that opportunity requires you to notice market trends. What are some market trends you see coming up?
So again, I would point to a couple of different market trends that would be either technological in nature, so faster microprocessors, more and more wireless access, people becoming more mobile in how they use technology. And I think it's interesting to sort of extrapolate, because when you're thinking for a disruptive innovation, you have to think about not where are these things now, but where will they be a year from now, 2 years from now? And the nature of technology is interesting because you don't have to wait very long to see a lot of change. A lot of technology is influenced by Moore's law, which typically means that it improves about 60% a year. So that's a fundamental amount of change. The other thing to watch for are perhaps trends in society, how people share information or use technology. Who could have predicted the whole Facebook and Twitter phenomenon with people happily sharing all the details of their daily lives online, or YouTube with people posting videos of all types online. So the societal changes are important too, because sometimes it's already possible to do, or the technology exists to do what people want, but the culture isn't ready. And sometimes what also is interesting to look at are failures. And what we mean by that is, you know, it's not always the people that are first that succeed. Sometimes people just sort of revisit an old idea and they just make it better. And sometimes the people that succeed are the ones that actually have taken advantage of several repeated failures. And I like personally to look at repeated failure, because if people thought it was good to try again, then there's usually something in there that's worthwhile. And therefore, it's interesting to study that.
If you could offer one piece of advice to our Cisco iPrize participants around the world, what would you say?
One piece of advice. Boy, that's a tough one, because keeping it to one will be hard. But I would say try to keep your idea simple and crisp. So this is back to the simple, big idea. Try writing it down on a piece of paper. And if you can't get it down to 10 words or less, then you probably have too many unrelated things in your idea. Take it down to the bare essence. And we have a simple saying, which is that it's easier to sell aspirin than vitamins. And what we mean by that is find the pain point. What is the problem you're solving? Because if you can articulate it as a problem statement, we can make this problem go away. That's very compelling, because people can relate to solving problems. So simple, big idea, 10 words or less.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching the iPrize webcast. Be sure to tune in for future episodes and visit us online on cisco.com/iPrize.